Okay, folks, you might have heard that I have been permabanned from Twitter. That's right, I have been permanently suspended from Twitter, so I can no longer tweet there or DM there or anything else. Now, I am on gab.com. If you haven't created an account there and you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do that now is to go over to gab.com, create an account, and then you should be able to do what's called a Gab chat, which is essentially the same thing as a DM. So please do get in touch with me there if you need to. And what I wanted to do was try and turn this into an opportunity to see what Twitter could do better about its lockout and suspension system. Because if you've ever been on Twitter, then you may have encountered a time when you've gotten locked out or temporarily suspended from the system for one or more tweets that you've done. And in those cases, Twitter has responded in a very, very haphazard way, at least in my case. Now, this is my own experience with Twitter, and it's kind of hodgepodge. I don't have really an accurate recollection of what Twitter has put me through in this regard. And, I'll look back on some of the tweets that I had done. I'm not going to look back on them here, but I can think back on some of the tweets that I posted for which I was suspended and think to myself, okay, yeah, that one did go a little too far. I understand why I got booted on account of that one, but there's other tweets that I posted that were jokes, that were just basically told in humor, or that were stating scientific facts. And for some reason, that ran afoul of somebody on Twitter who reported it. And so there were times when I really wanted to submit appeals of the tweets, and there were times that I just said, oh, I'll go ahead and I'll take the hit. So here is a brief recounting of what I recall as being my own experience with Twitter suspensions. So the first time I ever violated the Twitter rules, or so they say, I got a 7-day suspension. The next time, I got a 3-day suspension, which is kind of weird because you would think, okay, why is it I'm getting a lesser suspension the second time around? The next time, it was back to being a 7-day suspension. The next time was a 3-day suspension. And then I got a 0-day suspension. I actually got locked out for a particular tweet. And when I when I basically said, okay, yes, remove the tweet, take it down, etc., I was immediately allowed back in, which just makes absolutely no sense. The sixth violation, which was the most recent one that I knew of, is one that I appealed. I had posted 2 tweets that I believed were scientifically accurate, but somebody on Twitter raised an objection to it because they felt that the scientific accuracy was a disparagement towards certain groups. I was like, that's a load of crap. But at the same time, I didn't have, at first I was thinking I would just take the tweets down, but I thought, this is one where really this should be allowed to be said on Twitter. This is not something that should be prohibited from being said, or else nobody's going to be able to have an honest discussion on Twitter about this subject. And so so I went ahead and I submitted an appeal. I actually submitted a couple of appeals, and then a couple days later, I was informed that my account was suspended permanently. Now, I have no way of knowing at this point why my account was suspended. It was either suspended for the 2 tweets that I appealed on, but I can't think that that's the case, because if it were, then that's basically saying that if you appeal us, if you question our judgment, then we're going to permanently suspend you. So I have to think that it was actually for something else, but I don't know what, because the only thing they're telling me is that I'm permanently suspended, and I don't know why. So I've sent them a second appeal saying, can you please tell me why I have been permanently suspended? Because one of the things you're asking me to do is tell us why you disagree with why we suspended you, and I don't know why you suspended me. It could be any one of a number of things that either somebody's gotten wrong about me, mistaken identity, misinterpretation of a tweet I posted. It could be the fact that I had a couple of accounts on Twitter, a couple of different Twitter accounts, but I created those way back in the day before I ever had a Twitter suspension on my record. So I have no way of knowing why they think that my account was worthy of suspension. So this is what I'm inquiring into now. Whether they ever get back to me on that, I have no idea. But this has been basically my experience with Twitter. Has been, I'd get a 7 or a 3 day suspension, and maybe no time at all in suspension jail, in Twitter jail, as we like to call it. And then I appealed, and then all of a sudden I'm permabanned, and I just don't know why. So, my experience with Twitter is that the punishments have been completely arbitrary. I mean, they don't match the crime, and they certainly, the more suspensions I accumulated, it didn't seem to be like any big deal to them, because they would basically up the punishment or lower the punishment as they saw fit, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. So that meant there was no way for me to know how close I was to being permanently suspended. I mean, did the fact that I had so many suspensions to my credit, did that matter to them at all? I have no way of knowing. I have no way of knowing why or how close I was, or, was I riding the edge, or was, I in pretty much good graces until a whole bunch of people piled on. I have no way to know. So this is another bad thing about the Twitter experience I had. And then last but not least, the appeals process in Twitter is absolutely terrible. Because, for one thing, there's two appeals paths, and one of them they don't immediately let you know about. The other one is basically the appeals path that they shove you into on Twitter itself, and they only give you like 280 characters to make your case as to why this tweet that you posted should not be taken down. Now, that's a ridiculously small amount of text to give to anyone. I mean, it's just you wind up trying to give a tweet in your defense. And really, I mean, if you're trying to explain how somebody misinterpreted your tweet, or if somebody got you wrong on something, or if you think that this is actual science that you're posting, as opposed to that, and you need to bring up the justifications or articles about it, then you don't have any room for that. And so the appeals screen that they give you is terrible. Now, they do have a separate appeals path that's available on help.twitter.com, and I would advise, if you're ever suspended, that you go that route. It's help.twitter.com, and you can look up what to do about your suspended account. And the reason you want to go through that path is because the box that they give you there to make your case is unlimited text. You can just write as much as you want. You're not limited to 280 characters on that particular screen. But it still has its drawbacks, because one of the things I found was that there's no way to check on your appeal status. If you've appealed a tweet, if you've appealed a judgment against you, if you're appealing your suspension, you have no appeal number associated with that. You can't take an appeal number and submit it into a form somewhere on help.twitter.com and see how close you are to being evaluated. Are you number 10,000 in the queue, or are you number 100 in the queue? How long do they think it's going to take to get to your particular appeal? Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 4 months? Because you might want to decide that, look, this appeals process isn't worth it. I'm just going to take the tweet down because I don't want to be suspended for that long. I don't want to be without Twitter for that long. Because one of the things about the Twitter appeals process is that for as long as you are on appeal, you are suspended from Twitter. So you can't do anything on Twitter while you're waiting for your appeal to be settled. So it seems to me like one of the reasonable things they could have done all this time is give you a way to check and see how long you're going to have to wait for your Twitter appeal to be resolved. And not only that, but if you wait on appeal, then the time that you're spent on appeal doesn't even count at all towards the time that you get as a punishment. So let's say that I'm getting a 7-day suspension because I posted thus and so. I say, well, I'm going to appeal this. And then I sit there and I wait for my appeal for 5 days. And now I say, you know what, screw this. I'm just going to take the tweets down. So I take the tweets down, and the clock on my 7-day suspension starts then. So I wind up being suspended for 12 days instead of 7 days because I chose to make an appeal. That's not right either. So that's one of the things that I do not like, is that you stay suspended during your appeal, and that's just that time that's spent suspended does not count towards your overall suspension. So I have a big problem with that as well. Now, how should Twitter work? How should this system be done? What is a better punishment system for Twitter? Well, I've heard that on YouTube they use what's called a strike system. And in this strike system, you accumulate strikes, and while you've got a strike on your account, then maybe you can't post here or there. If you, for 30 days, maybe you can't put up any new material. It takes time for this strike to go away, and so you're on a probationary period after that. That is the way that I think Twitter's punishments ought to work. So let's say you have your very first strike. You've posted something offensive. It breaks the Twitter rules in some way, shape, or form. Somebody has reported you on Twitter. What do you get? Okay, your first strike is going to net you a 1 day suspension. All right, you're going to be blocked off of Twitter for 24 hours. Now, you might look at that and think 1 day suspension, that's like nothing. Oh, let me tell you, if you are used to having immediate access to Twitter all day, every day, and you are suspended for a day, you will feel it. And that's one of the things that I don't think most people know, is that there are a lot of people out there who don't know if what they do is going to break the Twitter rules or not. And so they really need kind of a lenient punishment, but they need enough punishment to know that, hey, you do need to be on good behavior while you are on this site. And a 1 day suspension will get the message across. Now, what happens if they have a second strike? Well, that'll get you a 3 day suspension. All right, 3 days without Twitter. That's going to be agony for a lot of people. Then, third strike, you're up to a 7 day suspension. Your fourth strike is going to put you in a 1 month suspension. Your fifth strike will put you in a 3 month suspension. A sixth strike will put you in a 6 month suspension. And here is the last point. The seventh strike will put you in a 1 year suspension. Now, I am arguing here that there should be no such thing as a permanent Twitter suspension. And that's up for debate. I mean, that is something that I could understand if somebody has gone through and done, 7 of these in a row and just cannot contain his or her behavior. Or especially if this person is doing some kind of maybe doxing against people, such that every time that person is let back on Twitter, there's more doxing information gone out there. If this person is displaying completely unrepentant behavior, I could say that yes, maybe a permanent suspension by the seventh strike would be warranted. But really, if you're going like a year between you're having a year-long Twitter sabbatical, it's going to take a die-hard, malevolent personality to just keep this up year after year after year. And eventually, of course, the person's going to die someday. So eventually the problem will resolve itself. So I don't know. This part is arguable, but I would like to think that Twitter, given how much access and information there is on Twitter, there really should not be such a thing as a permanent suspension. But, I could be argued out of that point of view. But I'm going to say for right now that 1 year should be the maximum suspension on Twitter. Now, how does this strike process work otherwise? I mean, do you just accumulate these strikes and they never go away? Well, no. I mean, the first thing is every 6 months that you're not on suspension, 1 strike is removed. So if you can go 6 months without getting a suspension again, then 1 strike will be removed from your record. Now, here's another important one. Once a strike is applied on account of 1 or more tweets, no tweets prior to the latest offending tweet can add a strike, but it can force a 1 day suspension. So let me just go with the first portion of that. Once you have a strike applied on account of 1 or more tweets, no tweet prior to the latest offending tweet can add a strike. Why is this important? Well, because one of the things that people like to do on Twitter is if they determine that they hate you for some reason, then they will go back to your account and they will not only report what you've done, in the recent week, but they will go back years. They will do searches on you to see if you've used any offensive language, to see if you've posted anything in the past that could be brought up as something to be struck down for. And here's the thing, if it's in the past, well, you may have changed your views and you may have changed your practice. You may have actually been called on account of that particular tweet or something like it beforehand. And maybe you've changed the way that you tweet so that you don't make those kinds of offenses anymore. So those should not be counted against you. Now, it may be necessary, however, that those tweets in your past be taken down, and that's why I've got this caveat on there that although a strike cannot be added to your account on account of one or more of these earlier tweets, it can force a 1-day suspension that does not count against your 6-month strike removal period. And why is this? And I was thinking in terms mostly of doxing. If you've put up someone's personal information and then later on, and nobody reported that, but later on, maybe you did something against somebody else or made some other offense, and somebody reported your tweet, and you got a strike on account of that. Well, you don't want to say then that, well, I can never bring up this doxing tweet in the past because that would mean applying a strike to a past tweet. And that means that the doxing information will always be out there. That's not going to work. You can't have that. Twitter does have a duty to take down that information. However, they don't need to put a strike on your account because of that information. They can just basically give you a 1-day suspension, which you can then appeal or not appeal. And at that point, you can take down the tweet and it's gone, or else argue your case maybe successfully as to why that information was public information anyway, or something like that. But it's not going to count. It's not going to add a strike against you, and it's not going to count against your 6-month strike removal period. So that way, people cannot just completely victimize your account by going back to stuff that may be years old and trying to bring it back and hold it against you. I mean, they can basically make life inconvenient for you, but they're not going to wreck your account on account of years old tweets. So the other thing is we needed a revised appeals process, and the first portion of the revised appeals process is that no matter which way you do your appeal on Twitter, you need to have unlimited appeals texts. You need to be able to justify yourself and your case fully. And so whether you go through the Twitter means, which right now takes you just to the 280 character window, or whether you go through help.twitter.com, you need to have unlimited text available to you so that you can make your case for being taken off a suspension. You also need the ability to check on your appeal status, including an ETA for resolution. I want to be able to know when I am suspended, and if I submit an appeal, I want to know that this appeal is going to be handled within an estimated 10 days, 30 days, 60 days. Give me an idea of how long this is supposed to take so that I can make a judgment for myself on whether or not to even bother to submit an appeal, or whether I just need to cancel the appeal and take the tweets down, or whether I'm willing to wait it out. I mean, that was one of the things on this last case where I had a couple of tweets that I decided to appeal. I basically said, if this is going to take 2 or 4 months to resolve, I will wait it out because I think this is worth taking up the issue. And then I got permabanned in a couple of days, and I never found out where my appeals would have gone. Or if that was the resolution of my appeals, that they just basically said, well, this seems to be an unrepentant sinner and we're just going to throw him into hell. Okay, whatever. But that's one of the things that I want, is the ability to check on the appeal status. And the last thing is the time that I spend on appeal should apply towards the time that I would normally be suspended. And it also should not count against the 6-month strike removal period. So let's say that I'm on appeal for 2 months for a tweet that would have given me a 7-day suspension. The moment my appeal is resolved, one way or the other, that time that I spent on appeal should count toward the suspension time. In other words, I should not have to be 2 months on appeal and then 7 days on suspension because I lost the appeal. And likewise, I should just be basically done at that point because I have already suffered enough. This is like basically time served, and so when you're being held in jail, awaiting the results of your trial, and then you've got a sentence, and then they basically apply the time that you spent in jail already to the sentence. That is what should happen on Twitter as well. And it also, the appeal time should not count against your 6-month strike removal period. So let's say, again, I have a 2-month appeal time, but it was a 7-day suspension. My 6 months should start from the end of wherever the 7 days cut off. It should not depend on my the amount of time that I spent on appeal. It shouldn't start like the 2 months later as opposed to the 7 days later. So that's an important issue as well. So this is my feeling on how Twitter should improve its punishment system. It needs to move from this arbitrary, loosey-goosey, we're not really going to tell you how much in danger you are kind of system, and we're definitely not going to tell you why we permanently suspended you system. We need something that is going to be fair and cumulative and gives plenty of signals to somebody who is using Twitter saying, look, you are going to wind up losing your Twitter access for a good long while. I would say no longer than a year. Some people may say permanently. We can disagree on that, and maybe Twitter will have its own opinion on that. But we definitely need more signals from Twitter, and we also need a better appeals process so that when we decide we're going to challenge Twitter's judgment, we have some way of staying in contact with them and being apprised of our status and getting updated as we need to be, and also just having just a sense of the time it's going to take to go through this process. So if you could do me a favor, of course, I've been permabanned from Twitter, so nobody's going to see this video on Twitter unless somebody who watches it posts it there. So if you could please share this video through your Twitter account. They're not going to block you or ban you or anything for that. I mean, this is just basically a video that's suggesting a better punishment system. And also share it on other social media platforms if you see it. If you're on Gab, if you're on Locals, if you're on Minds, if you're on something else, Mastodon, a Discord server. Let's get this out there because I really think that it needs to get in front of Elon Musk's eyes somehow. And of course, I no longer have the ability to put it there. So if you can help me out on that, I'd really appreciate it. Also, like I said, I am on Gab.com now for the foreseeable future. And if you want to reach out to me there with any ideas and stuff, or if you have like comic books needing review, that's one of the things that I do for people as well. Then let's go ahead go ahead and create yourself a Gab account. And I would advise creating yourself a Gab account in any case because under the current Twitter system, you never know if you're going to suddenly find yourself in the same situation that I'm in now, where I'm permabanned for I know not what reason. So thank you very much for watching. Again, please do try and both subscribe if you haven't already, but also post this out to Twitter if you have a Twitter account out there. And in my next video, I think I will address what it's like being a suspended Twitter user and what Elon Musk could actually do to improve the suspended user experience. Because, actually being a suspended user should only mean that you're not able to interact with other Twitter accounts. It really shouldn't mean anything else other than that. You're just not seen, you're not heard, but you've got the same access as anyone else. So that's what I would suggest anyway. So that's pretty much it for me. Thank you again. Please do subscribe, and I will talk to you later.